This video is going to be about analyzing the MBTI personality type and the personality disorders and diagnoses for Ed Gein in the Monsters series played by Charlie Hunnam. So this is specifically going to be analyzing this portrayal of Ed Gein, not as much analyzing the real Ed Gein, who may very well have been ISFP as well, but I'm not 100% convicted right now, having not done the full extent of the research. But I am convicted that this portrayal by Charlie Hunnam of Ed Gein is portraying Ed Gein as an ISFP personality. So Charlie Hunnam is ESTP, which is why he played ESTP Jax so perfectly in Sons of Anarchy. But I thought this was a weird and probably wrong casting decision before I watched the series, because I think a feeler personality would fit better to relate to the gender dysphoria. But surprisingly, ESTP Charlie nailed it regardless, and one way he actually matches his ISFP character's personality is they're both SP personalities. So he can relate to the passive P personality, and also I divide the whole population up into 4 major factions of personalities as NJNI users, NPNE users, SJSI users, and SPSE users. So Charlie can relate to ISFP Ed Gein from them both being in the SPSE using faction, which is the most childlike and infantile of all the factions, which factors in greatly to the devolvement of Ed's personality, how he doesn't take agency over his own life, but lets himself be controlled, directed by more dominant, less infantile personalities. So this monster Ed Gein story is very much like another Norman Bates and Norma Bates story. Very, very similar. I've done extensive analyses on the Norman and Norma Bates stories from the Psycho book to the original Psycho movies and the Bates Motel portrayal, talking about the different personality types and disorders we see in each of those, and how it stays on track and how it veers off track in many ways in the evolution of portrayals. So for Monster Ed Gein story, you can basically think of it as another Norman and Norma Bates story, except for the son has a different personality type that is distinctly different in many ways while very similar in other ways. So the original Norman Bates in the Psycho movies was portrayed as an INFP personality and played by an INFP personality, Anthony Perkins, and then later it was portrayed as an INFP personality again in Bates Motel, but portrayed by what I think is an INTP personality in Freddie Highmore. And I made some content talking about how I've seen in real life how INTP can be real life Norman Bates with their mothers surprisingly effeminate, just like INFP types. And so in this Monster Ed Gein story, we see basically the same story in so many ways, except now the Norman Bates is an ISFP instead of an INFP. So supposedly Ed Gein inspired the Norman Bates stories, so now as we are comparing these as different flavors of Norman Bates stories, I wonder if the original personalities inspiring these stories were actually intuitive or not, which the major difference would be intelligence levels, while they would still all be gender dysphoric as feminine feeler personalities. But it's obvious that with all of the personalities of the sons had in common is they were feeler personalities with gender dysphoric, effeminate female brains trapped in male bodies. They were passive P personalities that let themselves get pushed around and domineered and controlled in many ways to the point where they sort of disappeared, metaphorically. They were heavy FI users which suppress emotions, since both INFP and ISFP are FI dom types, so they're feeling dominant personalities, but all of those feelings are suppressed and not externalized due to the FI being an internalized, not externalized function. So that suppression can lead to bad mental health outcomes. So I'm going to play a clip of Charlie Hunnam talking about how or why he chose to make the voice of Ed Gein all soft and sweet and feminine. The voice was the main lead that led me to the ISFP personality typing. Even though the reason Charlie Hunnam claims to give him that type of voice to try to gain his mother's love isn't really the reason he has that tone of voice, it's just inherent in his feminine ISFP personality. The voice still ended up being a strong point in the right direction for me to determine that this portrayal of Ed Gein is an ISFP personality. And after listening to some clips of Ed Gein's real voice, it was very whispery and soft-spoken, so I think it was accurate to reality, even if he kind of exaggerated it for emotional effect. Wherever you see males who have voices like whispery, soft-spoken girls, you're most likely seeing ISFP types. Some examples are Michael Jackson, Prince, John Travolta, Justin Timberlake. So in the Norman Bates stories with an INFP Norman Bates, I say the heavy NE extroverted intuition in NP types makes them prone to multiple personality disorder, since it's always broadening things and can't narrow things down, and that includes their concepts of identity. And then the FI leads to emotional suppression, which makes things worse. So the INFP Norman Bates has a legitimate bona fide multiple personality, or dissociative identity disorder, and his other personality is his mother, and we see him switching back and forth between a boy named Norman and a woman named Norma, and I think we also see this switching back and forth in this portrayal of Ed Gein. And where it's most apparent is when Ed is trying to cover up his crimes. When Norman is locked up in a jail cell, we hear his mental conversations, and they are in the voice of his mother, which shows his mother personality is dominant in his mind. And we don't see a scene like that with Ed's mental conversations being heard in Augusta's voice. But there are other giveaways when we see the inconsistencies in his behavior, as he goes from blacked out, traumatized child who can't remember hurting people to going to the hateful mother that wants to inflict pain on filthy whores, or the scheming mastermind mother that wants to cover up the crimes she committed through her son to protect her son and herself from accountability for those crimes. So when Ed kills someone, like his brother for instance, he did so very obviously acting as his mother. So does he also have a bona fide multiple personality disorder? ISFP types do not have that heavy NE extroverted intuition that NP types like INFP have, so I wouldn't see them as prone as INFP types to a full-blown multiple personality disorder. But another main factor that may actually make them prone to multiple personality, just like the INFP, is the heavy FI, which wires them to suppress everything emotionally, which ends up building up resentments that backfire over time or make them feel like they have to compartmentalize or fragment their identity or personality to be more acceptable to others. So in some ways, I would agree with the diagnosing psychiatrist in the film when they diagnosed him with schizophrenia, a split from reality, rather than diagnosing him with multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder. At first, I would agree, but then I go back on it. Because without the heavy NE of the INFP, I would think the ISFP is less prone to a full-blown multiple personality. But the emotional suppression with the heavy FI still leads them to need to dissociate from reality so much to feel better within themselves that this would lead to a split from reality, but not a split personality. But the way that he is switching back and forth between being Ed and being Augusta, the mother, just like Norman switches from being Norman to Norma, makes me think in the end, I would just go ahead and say Ed also has multiple personality disorder that was induced by his heavy FI introverted feeling that makes him very suppressive, and induced by his gender dysphoria and his mother's covert narcissist psychological abuse. So specifically when Ed kills his brother, he switches back and forth between being Ed and being Augusta. 1 minute he's saying gotcha like a kid that just tagged his brother in a game of flag football or something innocent and childlike, or he's crying like he wants his brother to wake up. And the next minute he's moving the body and starting a fire and staging the death to look like an accident from smoke inhalation. And when he is covering up his crimes, it makes us question, like, is he faking it when he acts like he can't remember the people he's killed? When he acts like he has blackouts like Norman Bates that make him unable to remember things he has done? And I think the answer is no. He's not faking it. He's just switching between the boy and the mother personality. And the boy really doesn't know while the mother knows and tries to control things. And it's sort of reiterated by him passing the lie detector test. It's like the innocent boy, Ed, took it's actually a girl, but what we see as that boy took the lie detector test, and he could honestly say no. He didn't kill those people because he wasn't in the mother personality when he took the lie detector test. If he was in the mother personality when he took the lie detector test, then he would not be able to honestly say no, he didn't kill those people or didn't remember killing them. But because another personality inside him did those things, that's how he's able to have the parts of himself so compartmentalized to have his mind really believe and be convincing enough on a lie detector test when he's honestly saying, no, I didn't kill those people, I don't remember what happened. So it wasn't just the voice that tipped me off to ISFP, although a male with a soft whisper, feminine voice is very often strongly indicated as ISFP. But all of the dancing in this portrayal, like John Travolta and Michael Jackson Prince style dancing, is also ISFP. Another thing that led me to ISFP typing is seeing the projections of Ed's reverse type personality, ENTJ. I think one of the people Ed fantasized about having communications with is an ENTJ. The bitch of Buchenwald. She is portrayed as a very masculine and very sadistic Nazi woman who skins Jews and makes furniture pieces out of them. I think this person that Ed is inspired by and imagines direct communications with is a projection of his reverse type personality, the ENTJ. So the reverse type of ISFP is ENTJ, and everything to its extreme becomes its reverse in many ways. In ISFP, Ed was pushed to extremes by the abuse of his ESFJ covert narcissist monster, Augusta, just like ESFJ covert narcissist Norma Bates. And so since ISFP Ed was under such extreme circumstances, it would make sense that sometimes he would present as an ENTJ personality. And so him idealizing this woman and imagining communications with her is a projection of the ENTJ personality inside of him that is taking over. And it's partly the ENTJ inside him that can be okay with skinning humans and eating them and wearing them and making furniture out of them. In the ending scene, Ed is just soaking up all these congratulations. People admiring him for being famous or for using his fame to do some good by helping to catch other killers like Ted Bundy. And so an ISFP is a common covert narcissist, so they're born predisposed to the addiction to the drug called narcissistic supply that comes from this kind of external validation. And an ENTJ type is a T dominant personality who's most concerned with tribe validation. So the ending scene is really showing the narcissism and the addiction to the drug called narcissistic supply we see in Ed Gein. Whether that's from the ISFP common covert feminine narcissist in his core ISFP personality, and or whether it is more of a manifestation of the outlier overt masculine narcissist of the T dominant ENTJ he acts as episodically. Either way, Ed Gein is a narcissist addicted to the drug called narcissistic supply, just like his evil mother. So even though he's a victim of his common covert narcissist ESFJ monster, he's also born predisposed to being a common covert feminine narcissist himself in his ISFP personality. The main difference being that SFJ covert narcissists use FE, which expresses emotion, and SFP covert narcissists use FI, which suppresses emotions. So again, I wouldn't underemphasize how much damage his mother did to him, but at the same time, I'd also say he was born predisposed to narcissism, an addiction to the drug called narcissistic supply, regardless of how she parented him. So this story, like the Norman Bates story, is supposed to be a tale about how much damage an evil, hateful mother can do to a son. And I wouldn't want to underemphasize that. I've emphasized that plenty in my Norman Bates analysis videos, how significant the damage is that is done by these ESFJ common covert narcissists, love-hating, death-loving women. But I think it's very important to point out a factor that is equal or greater in predisposing Ed to these personality disorders and crimes, and it's gender dysphoria. So gender dysphoria is a huge theme on my channel, and it's a huge factor in determining the intersection of MBTI personality types and personality disorders. And so I'd say it's the gender dysphoria inherent in feeler personalities born in male bodies that predisposed Ed to be the way he was and do the things he did. And it may have only gone to such extremes because of the extremes of abuse inflicted on him by his covert narcissist mother. So when we're trying to figure out what makes guys like Ed or Norman tick, yes, it's a major factor how their mothers were so evil to them. But even before their mothers were in any way with them, they were born with gender dysphoria, a female brain that did not match their male anatomy. And without a healthy way to work out that gender dysphoria, and in the most unhealthy environment possible with so much abuse from a common narcissist monster that hates women, it's no wonder that they end up becoming evil women in their own minds. They may have just became women, but their mothers were huge factors in them becoming evil women. So to understand Ed and Norman, the more you actually picture them as women, the better you will actually understand them. They were putting on wigs and dresses, and at the worst, even making women suits out of female body parts. And all of this is a way they are showing you their brain is female. And the female brain wants to try to make the body match the brain. So I've said in one of my videos about the intersection of MBTI and gender dysphoria that about 50% of all men are feeler personalities, which makes them born with gender dysphoria. So gender dysphoria is extremely common and needs to be addressed in so many ways. And these Norman Bates stories are like cautionary tales of how bad things can get when gender dysphoric boys also have mothers that teach them to hate women. Then when they try to become more and more like women to match the female brains they were born with, they will end up becoming evil women like their mothers, hating women, wanting to punish women. But in any case, to understand them best, we just always have to picture them as women, since their brains were always female from birth, no matter how they were parented. All feeler personalities are born with feminine female brains regardless of sexual anatomy, and all thinker personalities are born with male masculine brains regardless of sexual anatomy. And the only exception I've seen is INTP and ENTP, which due to the heavy NE extroverted intuition trying to be all the things, and due to them being the surprising empaths that they are, the NTPs end up just as effeminate despite being thinker personalities. So when women have sons with feeler personalities or NTP personalities, they have to be aware of the reality that their son is grappling with gender dysphoria their entire life. Their brain is wired to be female, and this will manifest in many different ways. And in the sickest environments with the most evil covert narcissist monsters filling their heads with women-hating rhetoric, it's going to manifest in the absolute worst ways. And that worst way is these Norman Bates Ed Gein stories, where sometimes they're just these sweet, passive, soft-spoken boys, and the next they're hateful, spiteful, vengeful, sadistic women, hating women, lashing out at women. We see scenes in Ed Gein where he's acting just like the Norman Bates story. Like, the most dangerous person to be or the time to be near one of these Norman Bates sons is if you're a woman trying to seduce them. These Norman Bates can only be a child, which is actually a girl, or they can be anything. If they can be anything resembling a grown-up, it will be a woman or a mother. When you seduce the Norman Bates type, the child goes to hide, and the mother takes over. And the mother is a copy of the monster that filled them with women-hating rhetoric, telling them all women are filthy whores that should be punished. So one minute, Ed is sweetly flirting with a lady, but then the lady is really coming on strong and actively trying to seduce him, and then he snaps and starts turning into his mother and seeing the women seducing him as an evil, filthy whore that needs to be punished. So each time he was killing a woman trying to seduce him, he was acting as his mother, acting as a woman who hates women, a woman who especially hates women trying to seduce or defile her son. All of Augusta's rhetoric is exactly like Norma Bates' rhetoric. They're both portrayed as ESFJ common covert narcissists who hate love, love death. They have mental conversations of heavy SI, which seems very prudish and Victorian in many ways, and acts like sex is some filthy thing that will only lead to disease and pain, and that sex is sin and the work of the devil. Those are the mental conversations of SI from SJs. I want to make a video in the future about the common rhetoric we see with each of the 8 Jungian cognitive functions. And my ENTP Tanner Horner video kind of got into the rhetoric we see with any users. And these Norma Bates Augusta Gein stories give us the perfect example of what the rhetoric of heavy SI is, looping endlessly about horrors and sin. I should also mention now too that even if it seems like he's talking more soft-spoken like a girl to fulfill his mother's wishes she stated about wanting a female child, that was never really true either way. Female children of nasty covert narcissist monsters know these women hate their daughters just as much as their sons. So she would have hated a daughter just as much. A daughter never would have been good enough for her either, because the bottom line is, as a covert narcissist, she has zero maternal sense, and the innocence of children stirs up her demons, so she'd rather not have them at all. And if everyone already understood what I'm saying, that half of all males are born with female brains, then they would see that functionally she already has a daughter, not a son. So I rewatched all 8 episodes and made some notes, so I'm going to summarize each episode from my perspective and again reiterate all of these introductory points I'm making about gender dysphoric female brains trapped in male bodies, and all the ways the episodes subtly and not so subtly reveal that Ed has a female brain and adopts only female identities. Episode 1. The main takeaways from this first episode, which was very well written and informed, are that 1. Ed is cross-dressing, and his mother is calling him sexually deviant when she sees him jerking off wearing some women's lingerie. And she starts lecturing him with Bible verses about lust and sin and perversion. And we start seeing the kind of Norma Bates kind of rhetoric spewing from Ed's mother, Augusta. She's like a copy of Norma Bates from Psycho. They're both ESFJ common covert narcissists, and their rhetoric reflects their heavy use of SI introverted sensing, which is very focused on security and very fearful of anything that could threaten a sense of security, even if it's a false sense of security. So their rhetoric is very brutish and Victorian about sex, like it's filthy, and every woman is a slut who's spreading around diseases and should be punished for her sins. The SI is very scared of things like diseases, so they catastrophize the possibility of STDs. And SI is very scared of not fitting in with the crowd too, so their rhetoric is often like, unwed mothers are trash and worthless, since they would be scared to be shamed as unwed women. So we see a few different times in this episode that Augusta is going into the Norma Bates rhetoric about filthy whores and sin. Once after she finds him cross-dressing, and then finally after Ed kills his brother, Augusta has a stroke, and her health declines, and Ed becomes her caregiver, giving her sponge baths and stuff. In this episode, he also starts reading comics about an ENTJ, Ilse Ko, who was famous for being sadistic and torturing people. She saw his life unworthy of life in Nazi fashion. And so the reverse type for ISFP is ENTJ, and ISFP Ed was put under a lot of pressure and stress by his covert narcissist monster, so she was pushing him into his reverse ENTJ personality, just like Ilse Ko. And that was one way that I had a clue to accurately determine personality type. And so the sick Augusta goes to the neighbor one day, and she starts yelling in a rage at an unmarried woman, arguing with her love, saying she's a harlot and a Jezebel, and she deserves all the pain she gets in this world. And then Augusta drops dead in the middle of this raging rant, so she died doing what she loved to do best, rant about whores that should be feeling pain for their sins. And so then she's dead, and we see Ed crying like a baby at the funeral. So he's broken emotionally, obviously, and soon after he goes home, he starts hearing her voice. So it seems the trauma of her death made him create an alternate personality of her inside of him. She yells at him to get out of the chair when he sits in it, and he jumps out. Then he sits back down in it, and she doesn't yell at him. Did he sit down in the chair the second time as Augusta instead of Ed? And that's why she didn't yell at him to not sit in her chair? I'm trying to pick on every single instance where the mother persona takes over, and this scene with the chair may be subtly implying that he became Augusta before he sat down in the chair the second time. Episode 2. Norman Bates' psycho shower scene recreated with Ed dressed up as Augusta and using a knife on his girlfriend in the shower. Hitchcock talks to Anthony Perkins, saying he has to do the Norman Bates role because he's so much like the guy who inspired it. And Hitchcock's shown looking through peepholes himself and being domineered by his mother and going out with his mother to his movie premieres as a date. So maybe Hitchcock could relate to the passive P personalities passively letting their mothers dominate him. So again, this series is obviously drawing the comparisons and showing the inspirations behind the Norman Bates Psycho films and the story of Ed Gein. And so I would reiterate that this story of Ed Gein is just another Norman Bates story in so many ways, with two very similar, effeminate, gender dysphoric passive boys, INFP Norman and ISFP Ed. In this episode, he murders a bartender in the mother persona Augusta after the bartender tries to tell him she can get him a girlfriend from Chicago. This triggers him, just like if she was actively seducing him. Her soliciting him for sex triggered him, and he became the mother person identity, Augusta, called the lady a Jezebel and shot her. And then as the mother personality got rid of the body and covered up the crime. Episode 3. In this episode, Ed's girlfriend, the homicide buff who told him about Nazi atrocities, now tells him about transsexuals who had operations to turn from male to female, and he's in shock. In this episode, the cops come by to question him about the bartender who got shot, and the police interrupted him dressed up in a woman's suit and a dress dancing around the house. So maybe they interrupted him in the mother personality when they questioned him. When they questioned him, he made up stories saying he hadn't seen the bartender and told the cops she was involved with some shady people in Chicago. So it seems like here, when he's actively trying to mislead the cops and cover up the crimes, rather than just acting confused with memory gaps, he's in the mother persona doing damage control. Whenever he's actively trying to outsmart the police, he's in the mother persona. He's his ISFP self when he's just the confused child with memory gaps. His girlfriend tries to get him a babysitting job, and he says he feels like a kid inside still, which is true to SP personality, childlike immaturity that lasts throughout adulthood. In this episode, episode 4, Ed gets seduced by a lady at the hardware store. She's also ISFP just like him. This lady is an old lady who's ISFP, and she gets his guard down, and she reads what he wants, and she figures out how to get sex out of him by giving him what he wants, which was her lingerie. So he comes into the hardware store for lime to decompose dead farm animals, or so he tells her, and then she fronts him 5 cents, he's short for the order, and then she starts laying some emotional stuff on him, like he's so kind, and it makes her cry, and then he invites her to dinner, and she goes, and during the dinner, he asks if he can wear her bra, and she takes it off and gives it to him under the table, and they go roller skating. And then he mentions getting some wine, so they go home to get some wine, and he models the bra for her. And she wants him to fuck her, so she says, I'll let you have my panties if you pump me good. So he really wanted her panties, and he was a little drunk from the wine, so he did it. And afterwards, she's like insisting he move in with her, and so he goes back to have a talk with Mother to tell her he's moving in with her, and of course Mother's not having that. She lays in with all of her Norman Bates Covert narcissist rhetoric, guilting him for being such a horrible weak son for lust and making fun of him by getting duped by the devil, by getting seduced by a woman who has had sex with everyone in town. She tells him that he smells like venereal disease and he must have got from her. So then Ed gets in his head he needs to break things off with her. So next time he sees her, she's giving him a whole box of laundry. Just because she's giving him a whole... just because he likes it so much. And he starts saying that she manipulated him into fornicating and brought shame on him and shame on Mother, and that she has venereal disease, and she starts getting upset and mad and telling him to leave and taking her lingerie back. And then as he's leaving, he asks her to sell him a rifle, and he shoots her with it. So a lot of times during the act of seduction is when the boy will turn into the mother and lash out to hurt the woman seducing him. But there was sort of a delayed reaction on this one because of the alcohol and because of how much he was distracted by wanting to wear her lingerie. So this time he went through with the sex act, but then he felt shame afterwards with Mother's voice in his head. And then he felt the need to punish her for seducing him by killing her. During the roller skate date, Ed was imagining the ENTJ sadist Nazi lady saying his date, Bernice, would make a beautiful couch. And he kept that in his head. So after he kills her, he takes her out to the barn and he skins her, taking her skin so he can make objects with it. And he shows off his work to his girlfriend. And then there are a bunch of scenes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre to make comparisons to what Ed was doing, suggesting Ed used a chainsaw to work with the bodies. Episode 5. In this episode, Ed's masculine, overt narcissist, death-obsessed thinker personality, male brain girlfriend tells him she's going to New York to try to get a job with a homicide photographer. And he all of a sudden decides he wants to have sex with her because so they can solidify their commitment. But she lies and manipulates him to get out of it. And says like she's just not ready for sex, even though she's cheating on him all the time that he doesn't know about. And then he goes home and has sex with a dead body that can't reject him. He goes deeper in his imagination about this ENTJ sadist woman and her Nazi crimes. His girlfriend goes to New York to try to get a job with a crime photographer, and he makes fun of her and gives her a narcissistic injury, and she goes home where she swore she'd never go back to that small town. So there's a scene where Ed's girlfriend's mother sits down with her daughter and tells her she tried to kill her in utero when she was pregnant by throwing herself down the stairs repeatedly. I think this scene just really serves to emphasize how common narcissism is and narcissistic mothers are, and how the majority of people are predisposed to some form of narcissism. So maybe they're trying to blame the mother as another ESFJ covert narcissist, like Norma Bates saying hateful things to her daughter is the reason why her daughter is twisted and obsessed with death. But I'd say no. Her daughter was born predisposed to masculine overt narcissism as a sensor thinker personality, so she would have been a narcissist regardless of how her mother parented her. But it shows her mother was a narcissist too, a death-loving narcissist, a child-hating narcissist, just like Augusta and just like Norma Bates. And all sensors are either predisposed to covert feminine feeler narcissism or overt masculine narcissism as thinkers. And this show is full of sensors, not intuitive characters, so the rule applies consistently. So I think this scene just really shows, yes, the mothers are fucked up, yes, the kids are fucked up, and mostly it's just because nature made them all prone and predisposed to different flavors of narcissism, which makes them hate life, hate love, hate innocence, love evil, and love death. Episode 6. The ISFP Bernice body is found in Ed's barn, and his house is tossed, and lots of weird items made from humans are found, and Ed is arrested and takes the polygraph test, which he passes, because he took it as Ed, and it was as the other personality that was exactly like his mother Augusta, which was the one who actually committed the murders. Adeline, Ed's girlfriend, gets her 15 minutes of fame talking to the press about her relationship with Ed. She's a thinker, masculine, male brain, overt narcissist type obsessed with death. And if a feeler type guy was going to have a relationship, it would work best with a thinker, male brain woman to balance the masculine and feminine energy in a backwards gender work way. The interrogation with the cops, Ed claims not to remember, but it starts to seem like it's his mother Augusta trying to tell a cover story and mislead them. Detective asked if he ate the victims or fed them to people in town, passing it off as deer meat. I think he was being Augusta the mother when he did this. Covert narcissist monsters are notorious for poisoning or tainting food they give to people. Episode 7. This episode shows Ed Gein's weird items in his house going to auction, and Ed ending up in magazines and reveling and becoming famous as he's getting comfortable with life as a mental patient in the psych ward. ISFP are born predisposed to covert narcissism, the feminine, vulnerable kind of narcissism, and they're predisposed to addiction to the drug called narcissistic supply. So the theme of wanting to be famous, even if you're famous for being a psycho killer, is revealing the addiction to the drug called narcissistic supply. Ed comes into some cash from a nurse, presumably from the auction, and Ed asks the nurse to get him some radio so he can try to make contact with the Nazi lady he's obsessed with, and a transvestite he's fascinated with, because he wants to learn more about people who have transitioned from male to female. He also asks for new bra and panties with his money. So even if Ed's mother had not been a covert narcissist monster, Ed Gein was born with a female brain as a feeler personality either way. So he probably would have been wanting to wear girl clothes and try to be a woman, even if it didn't go to these sick extremes of trying to skin women to wear them as women's suits. So as he is out of touch with reality, he's hallucinating that he's talking to Ilsa Braun, this evil Nazi he heard about in magazines, being a sadist who makes lamps out of human skin. The reverse type of ISFP are ENTJ, and this person Ed is admiring is an ENTJ, so this woman is sort of a projection of Ed's ENTJ side that he experiences under stress. So he spends time on a radio thinking he's talking to her, and telling her he admires her, and he has copied her work making household items with human skin. He imagines that she already knows about him because he's so famous. They joke about joining a club for monsters, and he tells her he's wearing a bra while they're talking. She asks him what made him do these things, and he said he has no idea. He tells her that one day he walked in on his mother gutting a pig, and the blood made him vomit. He said he couldn't have never killed women because of how sensitive he is in general, and specifically to the sight of blood. Him talking about his mother gutting a pig like nothing is showing how he was being his mother when he committed the murders. She asks him how it felt to kill, and he says he can't recall. That's because his other personality, Augusta, did it. She complains about the horrid conditions she lives in prison. He says the place he's in the psych ward suits him just fine. This is an example of the childlike ISFP personality that is very passive and infantilized and wanting to be taken care of by more competent adults. ISFP are like children as adults looking for people to parent them. She claims she was following orders when she did bad things, but whose orders was Ed following, she asks, and he says mother's. Then he imagines she commits suicide in prison. And it cuts to a scene of Ed in women's underwear dancing to the song Enjoy Being a Girl. I mean, can it get any more obvious here that Ed was born with a female brain? No matter what body we see the girl living in, and it's not subtle the way Ed is making that clear. So when he is himself, he's really herself. He's either a girl named Ed, or he's a murderous woman named Augusta. Every time we see him in episode 6, he said, we never know who mother is going to be when she wakes up in the morning. And that's giving away to how Ed is enmeshed with his mother. They don't know where one of them begins and the other ends. His mother was already dead when he said that, but she lived on inside him. Just like in the Norman Bates story, Norman says, sometimes I see mother when she's not there, and sometimes I become her. And this story is just like that. Only difference is Ed is ISFP and Norman's INFP. But they both have that ESFJ covert narcissist monsters, looping heavy SI rhetoric about whores and sin and Jezebel, etc. in an alternate personality that they created. And that was the only female influence they had, was a very nasty woman. But their passive girl brains was just following the example of the only woman they knew how to become when they were destined to try to become like women around them, since they were born with female brains trapped in male bodies. The scene of Ed dancing in a bra and panties to the song Enjoy Being a Girl, I rest my case. He was born with a female brain as a female person, a feeler personality type. It cannot get any more obvious than that, than him dancing to a song called I Enjoy Being a Girl. Okay, I hope we get it by now. Next, it cuts to him talking to a transvestite he admires, claiming his doctor thought it would be good for him to talk to her. She starts with, what in the world do you think we would have in common? And Ed starts with, my trouser snake, aka my dick. I don't know, I feel disconnected from it. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that female brains trapped in male bodies don't send the right signals to their dick, so they don't want to pursue women sexually like masculine male brains do. And this is very consistent with gender dysphoric feeler personality, female brains and male bodies. I've seen it a million times. There's a mismatch between the gender of the brain, which is female, and the gender of the sexual anatomy, which is male. So basically, he barely ever wants to use his dick because he identifies as being a girl. He said he felt disconnected from it since childhood, so he was becoming aware of it. He felt like a girl in childhood. So counting up all the feeler personalities born as males means about 50% of all people classified as males have female brains, just like Ed. So gender dysphoria is so common. We need to acknowledge that so that when we're raising children who have genders in their brains that don't match the genders in their pants, we can direct their energy appropriately to safe ways to express all of this and build their identities, or else they might just copy whatever the most dominant sick woman is in their life, and they will start murdering women as women and make everyone confused and horrified. Gender dysphoria is common. Know how to recognize it in your kids, sons especially with female brains, so they do not become the most dangerous, like Ed, killing women as a spiteful woman themselves. He goes into the main theme of the show, which is like his mother caught him playing with it and flipped her shit, and that was what made him think he should get rid of his dick. But really, it was the gender dysphoria he was born with, the female brain he was born with, that made him want to be rid of it. His mother's abuse just exacerbated the whole thing and gave him some other explanation besides being born with a female brain to make sense of him not wanting to use his dick. And he says to her, you got rid of your dick, didn't you? All excited. Like he confides in her, he wears the body parts of women, particularly vulvas, breasts, and dances in them. He says he made a whole woman suit to wear a lady suit to make him feel and look like a lady. And then it cuts to Buffalo Bill scenes. And Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lamb is also an ISFP personality. So there's an exact personality matching these templates they're presenting here. And I always say Buffalo Bill's gender dysphoria kills because these guys wearing lady suits are actually female brains trapped in male bodies. And the longer we refuse to acknowledge this, the more we're just confused by what is driving them. Their brains are female. End of story. Sick females. But even if they weren't doing things to the sickest extremes, they would still be finding ways to be more of the woman they feel they were born to be with their female brains. Male bodies be damned. Goodbye Horses, Buffalo Bill dance scene, 2 dance scenes in this episode, very iconic, revealing the female brains. So the transvestite says she doesn't think she and Ed are alike at all and asks why he's in a mental hospital. He says he killed people and dug up graves. He says he thinks he dug up graves, but he didn't do the killing. So he's implying again that the Augusta inside of him was the murderer. She dismisses him and says there's nothing, that they are nothing alike, dashing his feelings. She says he's just some twisted sexual deviant, brushing him off and trying to end the conversation. And she's totally wrong. The reality is he just has gender dysphoria from being born with a female brain filler personality, like I'm saying, which is why he has all those wishes to become more like a woman. It's only expressed in the sickest way because his sick covert narcissist monster was his sole influence as a woman. So when he needed to model behavior after a woman, he modeled after the nastiest kind of woman possible. Cut to Ed hallucinating a new nurse on staff, forbidding cross-dressing. And he says that he's not happy. It feels like prison. He's not a prisoner. He's a mental patient. She says she doesn't believe he's crazy. He says he wouldn't hurt a fly, something Norman Bates says through Norman Bates in Psycho, which is implying that he's Augusta in that moment, that he hallucinates shooting the nurse, not Ed, because it's the mother's voice that says they wouldn't hurt a fly, not the son's in Psycho. So drawing the parallel clues us in that he's becoming Augusta. The nice nurse comes back and gives him keys and says she knows he wouldn't hurt a fly, and he uses the keys to go murder the mean nurse as Augusta, which he discovers later was a hallucination. He didn't really murder her. And then it cuts to him having an emotional breakdown with the doctor, saying he has no idea what's wrong with him. So what's wrong with him is he has an infantile female brain, common covert narcissist ISFP type, abused by a common covert narcissist ESFJ type, who made him develop dissociative identity disorder. And one of his identities is his mother, Augusta, and she's the identity he's operating under when he commits the murders. So Augusta is the actual murderer. Ed tells the doctor he thinks he sees the face of the devil in his room, wanting him to do bad things. I think this is built into covert narcissist personalities. They're predisposed to loyalty to evil. The doctor reveals he never sent the radios to the two people that Ed thought they were sent to, so he must have hallucinated his conversations with Ilsa, the Nazi lady, and the transvestite. Ed asks who he was talking to, and it cuts to a scene of Ed talking as the transvestite lady. So the doctor said he was playing out both voices, and he was talking to himself. So this shows how he was trying to become these women that he's admiring. He's playing out scenarios where he's actually the transvestite talking to him, or he's the Nazi sadist lady talking to him, and he's pretending to be them because he wants to become them so bad. And that's consistent with feeler personality, female brains trapped in male bodies. The women they admire and pay attention to, they envy them and they want to become them. If they show interest in a woman, it's not because they want to be with them, like in a relationship. It's because they want to be them, like become a better woman like them. So he was acting out becoming the two women he admired the most, which was not the best female role models, but he couldn't do much worse than his own monster. The doctor reveals he has schizophrenia, and I think this is a misdiagnosis because it's more accurate to say Ed has dissociative identity disorder, with one of the personalities being a copy of his mother. And then he tried to create other alters in the psych ward out of the other women he was influenced by and admired, the Nazi lady and the transvestite. The doctor tells Ed there is hope with medication that will fix him, so he takes it like a good little infant, like he's told without question. Episode 8. This episode starts with scenes of Ted Bundy torturing and killing women, and ENTP Ted Bundy fits into the theme of these offenders because, like I explained thoroughly in the ENTP Tanner Horner video, INTP and ENTP are the only exceptions to my gender brain rules that thinker types have male brains. INTP and ENTP have effeminate female brains, and when they act out against women, they are doing so as women who hate women, not men who hate women. So ENTP Ted Bundy similarly has the gender dysphoria that is the common theme of all these murders. Then FBI profilers go to prison to talk to Jerry Brudos, another gender dysphoric female brain trapped in a male body, obsessed with women's high heels. The profilers say the men both have deep hatred of women, and we just need to realize this deep hatred of women is coming from women, not men, since their brains are female. They hate them because they ain't them. They envy real women they can never be. Jerry looks like an ISFP, and he has the horrors rhetoric of a heavy SI user, just like the Norma Bates and the Augusta Gein, talking about killing whores to steal their high heels. The profilers make a note that Ed Gein is a big influence on all these killers. The profilers are not making the connections that I'm making. That's why FBI profilers should be coming to me for profiles. But the common theme between Ed Gein and all these other killers is the gender dysphoria, and how they all have female brains trapped in male bodies, wired to rival and spite women as women themselves. It just perpetuates the confusion over motives when we continue to see these offenders as males just because of their sexual anatomy, when their brains are clearly showing us the gender mismatch going on. The profilers go to visit Ed and show him photos to see if they can give them any insight on the Ted Bundy murders. Ed tells the profilers his mother left him entirely, so maybe the medication has made him stop hallucinating his mother's voice, giving him orders. The profilers ask him to focus on the Ted Bundy case, and they tell him Ted Bundy takes the heads. So Ed tells them cutting off a head is hard, and a hacksaw is the best tool for the job. He told them to look for someone buying a hacksaw. This ends up being some critical piece that led them to capture Ted Bundy in this fictionalized account, which makes Ed even more famous, which he revels in, the hits of the drug called narcissistic supply he gets from the notoriety, and putting his weird, sick ways to some kind of good use now to redeem himself in the end. Cut to a scene of another prisoner, Richard Speck, female brain trapped in a male body, talking about idolizing Ed Gein and killing nurses, and got busted from one whore nurse who hid. This person looks like an INFP personality, a female brain in a male body, very obviously wearing a bra and being the girl getting sex from a man in prison. Then Speck writes to Ed Gein saying Ted Bundy wrote him a letter showing a circle jerk of idolization between all the female brains that hate women and sadistically torture them. So Ed gives the info from the Bundy letter to the profilers, making another breakthrough for his increased fame. Then Ed watches the news and sees his tips help solve the case. And his head gets very big from the hits of Narcissist's supply, and he tells himself he did something good in the world. Then cut to Ed saying he's going to rest his eyes, but he dreams of all the gender dysphoric criminals idolizing him, talking about how much they're proud of being like Ed. Ed is then told he has lung cancer, so he's going to die soon. The nurse who told him his diagnosis says he should use the last of his days to write his own story, so other people can't twist his story. And he said he thinks other people know his story better than he does. This is a passive, infantile ISFP perspective, and shows his dissociative identity disorder and how confused he is and how he can't keep his life straight. So he's letting other people tell his story rather than feeling any compulsion to control the narrative about his life. He's a passive infant letting other people tell the story of his life. Well, no one's going to tell the story of her life better than me, okay? Ed Gein is a girl. That's the most important thing people really need to remember. So then Ed dies, and just like the dream, he had the last visions he has are of his gender dysphoric criminals who idolize him and still idolizing him. And there's Owner of a Lonely Heart song playing in an ISFP type music style like a Prince, Michael Jackson, John Travolta style, upbeat and feminine. And as Ed is dying, he's getting his last hits of the drug called Narcissistic Supply as he sees visions of people idolizing him and congratulating him on his fame. Then Ed sees his mother walking up some stairs and meets her on the stairs, and they share some sweet words about how they're famous now, revealing their sensor feeler personality covert narcissist addiction to the drug called Narcissistic Supply. And he finally feels like his mother is proud of him for making them famous. He said the only person he ever wanted to impress was her. Then it flashes back to him laughing with his mother like a child at home, and she reemphasizes again how proud she is of him for making a name for the Gaines, and she cries with pride. And then the last scene is Ed dies, and at the graveyard, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre person is there defending his grave from grave robbers. The last scene, even after all that talk about being proud of him, is Ed and his mother sitting on a porch having a drink, and her saying, "Only a mother could love you," and he just quietly smiles. If I have not convinced you a female brain born in a male body is a dangerous thing, well, you can't be helped, and good luck out there staying oblivious of the female brains trapped in male bodies that hate women, want to rival, spite, and torture them because they can't be them. All women need to be aware of males with failure personalities because they have female brains. These female brains all act like covert narcissists because they either are sensor feeler personalities that are predisposed to covert narcissism, or they're intuitive feeler male empaths who have gender dysphoria and who are covert borderlines mimicking and acting like wannabe covert narcissists. So functionally, all of the feeler personality males are the same. Female brains operating as covert narcissists. And they're extremely dangerous to actual women. They envy, rival, and spite, trying to outwoman women.